Hey everybody, thanks for joining us for another edition of the WTOC First Alert Weather Podcast. I am joined, as always, by meteorologist Andrew Gordon, and we have a special guest, as you can see in here today. We have honorary meteorologist Mike Seal. You've done weather before.
Honorary, yeah.
Few
times.
Honorary. Yeah. And we brought Mike in here today because Mike is kind of the expert on living in the cold. And we are doing this podcast here, at least where you were from.
You make it sound like I'm living in the Stone Age.
At least where you were growing up.
He goes home to his igloo.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're going to be talking about for this First Alert Weather Podcast is we have 3 First Alert Weather days coming up here due to the cold. So we want to make sure everyone's prepared for that. And we're going to share some tips on how to keep yourself safe and what to think about as we go on into the next couple of days. So, Andrew, let's get into what we have coming up here for this week.
Yeah, we definitely have some cold air that's going to be swinging on in midweek, so enjoy the nicer weather here for the next couple of days. It's really Wednesday morning, that first alert weather day that we're going to have that very cold air come in here, but that is matched with some wind, and that is what's prompting this. We're going to have wind chills that are in the teens widespread across the area.
So there you are. Start now. Look at these forecast wind chills, and we're recording this today as Monday, January 15th. Look at that cold air into the magenta and the white color sinking southward. And as we move on into Wednesday morning, when that cold air gets to our region, that's our forecast wind chill. 19 degrees here in Savannah, but as it zooms on in here, locally here, we are going to see some of those wind chills, into the mid to upper teens. Very cold. Don't normally every year see wind chills this low. So we just want to make sure that you are prepared for the cold coming up.
Yeah, Mike, that's nothing compared to the negatives that you dealt with growing up.
Yeah, definitely. I grew up in Minnesota, just to let everybody know out there. And up there, we have some very, very cold temperatures. And that wind chill is really the number during the wintertime that we look at. It's not so much the temperature could be 0, but we're looking at a negative 20 wind chill up there. And that's when it gets really dangerously cold that you don't want to be out in the elements for too long.
Exactly. So that's what we tell people, what you want to dress for, what you want to prepare. It's not really the temperature, as Mike mentioned, it's the wind chill. So freeze, we're going to be likely seeing freezes here for our Wednesday morning. So what should you do? If you have pets that are outside, bring them in. If you can't bring them in, make sure they have a way to keep warm, preferably inside, a lot of blankets or something to keep them warm. In a closed, maybe a shed or something, so they're not out in the exposed air.
Yeah, I've even seen people put big old blankets and things on horses and things like that. And even walking around our neighborhood, some of these cat houses kind of have little heaters that they can sit on. So people get creative.
Yeah, and of course, besides the pets, you got the plants, which are out there. They don't like to have this cold weather as well. Again, if you can't bring them inside, physically transport them in, you're going to have to cover these plants coming up here starting on Wednesday morning.
I think once we get into the cold temperatures where we've been talking about this for many years, that cold is cold. Once you get to a certain cold temperature, even if it's colder, it's going to feel colder. It just makes it so much quicker, though, that the extremities or anything else could be damaged or you could be injured or it could be life-threatening.
Yeah, and that wind is just the worst. We were talking about this earlier about the temperature could be like 25 degrees. It's not real different than if it's, let's say, 15 or 10 degrees. But you add that wind in there, and the wind is what makes it just really miserable. And it could be 30 degrees, but you got that wind out there. It's just going to feel so much colder. It just makes it so much unbearable, especially when you're not used to it. Some people might not have the proper gear. I know my daughter, who is away at college and doesn't want to wear, let's say, the proper winter gear, hat, gloves. I'm like, it's going to be cold. I'll be fine. Oh, all right. We'll see. Stuff like that. You want to make sure you're prepared. You don't want to mess around with this because this is going to be Wednesday morning. A lot of kids are going to be at the bus stop, maybe waiting outside. They need to be dressed properly for the cold.
Yeah, and thankfully the other 2 first alert weather days that we've been talking about, those are going to be over the weekend, so not school mornings, but still impactful, still cold for our Saturday and Sunday morning.
Yeah, and a lot of people are going to be using space heaters to keep themselves warm. So we want to make sure that they are aware of the the rules and regulations, the safetiness of using a space heater. It's a good option to have to keep yourself warm, but give yourself at least 3 feet between that space heater and anything that can be considered flammable, because you don't want to have fires happening here, and things can happen. A lot of times it'll be while you're sleeping. That's why you have the space heater on. And yeah, you don't want to have that happening when it's this cold out.
At this point, too, just bundle up with the blankets, get as many quilts as you can, wear extra little clothing, maybe a little hoodie sweatshirt, too, while you're sleeping. Anything else, to help keep that warmth in.
Some good advice. And again, Andrew mentioned the weekend. We have 2 more first alert weather days coming up for Saturday and Sunday, because even though we warm up a little bit on Friday, maybe even potentially colder air trying to return there. You see, these are actual temperatures. It'll be dry, so we don't have to worry about any type of frozen precipitation the way it looks right now. But look at the highs, only the 40s and lows in the mid to upper 20s. That's just half the story, though.
Yeah, we're talking about that cold, and it's really just going to be for the morning time frame, but we are looking at the wind chills as well. Once again, as we mentioned, it's going to be quite cold, therefore Saturday morning. I know a lot of us might have that luxury of staying in, past the coldest time of the morning, but still worth talking about.
Yeah, and those are, you're looking at if you're listening here, we're showing the forecast wind chills for Saturday. Again, that's even colder than Wednesday morning. Maybe 13. We rarely get that cold with these wind chills. This is something we don't see that often. And checking out what we have coming up on Sunday, still looking at some of those wind chills, which could be in the teens. So that's why we have the first alert weather days, just to make sure that people are aware. It's happening over the weekend, Andrew, as you mentioned, that hopefully a lot of people maybe sleep through it. By the time you get up out of bed, 8, 9 o'clock, a lot of the worst of the wind chills should be over.
Yeah, and thankfully this is somewhat short-lived. We'll warm up above freezing as we get into the afternoon. We're not staying below that or anything like that. And free from moisture this weekend right now. We don't have any rain in the forecast for it.
Yeah, so this is the time of the podcast that we usually talk about what we have coming up here for the weekend. Mike Sela, you are honored guest, or honorary guest, I guess. So you got any plans for this upcoming weekend?
No plans, I guess, just watching your forecast here. I was looking at that and looking at the wind chill, and when we get into the cold temperatures, and I was just having all these memories coming back about the cold. And I just remember when I was in high school, we would have to travel. We'd have to get up before school started, about 4 a.m., and we'd go and practice hockey. And that's because that's the only time we could get some of the ice time to go and practice. And then after that, you'd come back and you'd shower, and then you'd go out and maybe go get a donut or something like that. But when you walk out from where we were in our locker room out of our school to the parking lot, your hair would go from wet to frozen. Yeah. It would freeze. And that's what I was thinking about when we were looking at that and seeing some of those wind chills as we're getting into the teens.
Ooh. Yeah. That's when you know it's really cold out, when your hair, when your nostrils and everything in there start to freeze. That's some real cold weather. And I remember being so cold that even when you're driving your car, when we do go to college, it's probably about 25 minutes away when we commute every day. The car wouldn't be warm by the time you got to where you were going. It was still cold. It was still blowing cold air. It was so cold that they didn't have enough time for the heater to actually warm up. Those were not fun days.
Wow. Yeah, I don't have that, as cold of weather stories to share. Growing up most of my life in Texas, going to school in Oklahoma, we had ice, we had all that, negative wind chills, but it wasn't prolonged. So I don't have those memories. But anytime you're getting a Mike Sela flashback to cold air, not going to be a fun time.
And another one that hits in my head is I was anchoring the news in Austin, Minnesota, and it was going to be 30 below wind chill. And it might even be colder in the mornings. And they were debating or not. They were talked that it could get up to 60 below. And they were debating or not whether to close schools.
Wow.
So that just shows
debate.
It was a debate. I mean, they eventually did close it, but then I just remember that was 1997, and I thought, what am I doing still living up here? The hockey days are gone. Maybe it's time to move south, and that's what happened. That was the day I decided, okay, time to go south.
Moving south. We had this kind of the similar, and you probably did too, Mike, with the snow. When you get like 6 inches of snow, when you're still going to school, especially if it happens early into the season, because you only have so many snow days.
I think we had 3 snow days.
I forgot how many we had, but yeah. So you don't want to waste them too early in the season. 6 inches, 5, 6 inches, you're still going to school. Now,
As long as it wasn't blowing, and those snow drifts across the
you
the
had to
road.
worry more about that in the Midwest than I think we did here up in
because there
upstate New
was
York.
the bad ice underneath the snow drifts, and you just see the blowing snow across, and you can't see which lanes on the highway and stuff. So yeah, there was a lot of ice and a lot of sand that was out on the roads.
Yeah, so that's what we have coming up here. Andrew, anything you got coming up here for the weekend?
Not watching. I think I'm going to take some time off of NFL playoff football because my team did not.
Oh, you're a Dallas Cowboy fan. Yeah.
Maybe watch another fan base get disappointed and feel like I have.
I'm rooting for the Lions and the Bills. They've never won it before. They're two teams that have never. So that's what I'm going for.
Yeah, I'll go for the Bills. Why not?
I've always been a Steeler fan, but I haven't really paid attention to sports, and I always say that in years. So I wouldn't mind seeing the Bills win because I feel bad that they've got so many close. That was at 4 years or
4 years in a row.
Yeah, that they
90s.
went to the Super Bowl and lost. I had a roommate in college who was a big, huge Bills fan, and he was not happy during those years. But, we'll see what happens. Either way, should be good TV. And I got nothing going on. I had some tennis. I got maybe another tennis match coming up here, but you see that temperature of 45. I'm not looking to playing tennis outside in 45-degree temperature, so maybe that will warm up a little bit as we go through the next couple of days. Either way, cold. And I think that's pretty much going to do it for this edition of the WTOC First Alert Weather Podcast. For our special guests, Mike Sela and meteorologist Andrew Gordon.
Special.
You are special. In everybody's book, Mike, you are special. I'm meteorologist Dave Turley. Thanks for joining us for another edition of the WTOC First Alert Weather Podcast.